Ever since early 2025, Reform have established themselves as a very dominant party, as seen in the polls. They've been leading since this time and showing themselves to be a very clear threat to arguably all parties across the political spectrum. We're going to discuss why they have such a historically unusual rise, what exactly they've done to attract the right wing and even some of the left, and we're going to highlight the impact that this has on the traditionally very dominant right wing party, the Conservative Party, which later on in the episode we will be bringing in a young Conservative member to discuss in more detail what this looks like from the inside and what he wants for his party in the future to counter this. Now, Max, do you want to start us off?
Yeah, of course. I mean, we've really got to start with the 2024 election. Obviously, their worst defeat since the Duke of Wellington was leader of the party, which was a fair bit ago. And really, well, where did they lose votes? So the Conservatives, during that time, mainly lost it in the Blue Wall. So Boris Johnson was famous in 2019 for winning voters in the South who were in quite affluent areas, quite well educated, and they were quite attracted to the Conservative Party. But this coalition shattered in 2024, the Liberal Democrats sweeping a lot of the south of England. And, well, why was this? I mean, some people would argue that there were more populist elements of the party with immigration, so people like Suella Braverman, who's now in the other one, and Priti Patel. A lot of these figures kind of alienated a lot of their core voter base, which relied on sort of affluent areas in the south of England.
Mm-hmm. Do you want to just clarify for people, just in case, what it means to be a populist party or figure?
Yeah, so populism, it's not on one side of the political spectrum, but it's politicians who sort of appeal to the people and offer quite simple solutions to complex problems. So you see a lot of figures complaining about immigration, pointing at immigration, and portraying it as if we solved immigration, everything would be fine. And that isn't the case. But people are quite attracted to that. A lot of the times it's an emotional thing, because it's easy to sort of point the finger at certain issues and offer simple solutions. But yeah, it's definitely gained traction within recent years.
And it's kind of a anti-establishment movement in some ways.
Yeah.
Which
I missed that bit.
Yeah, no.
Yeah.
So why are people exactly voting for Reform? The main reason, obviously, is what Reform caters to, which is all about immigration. There's a huge rise in worries about immigration. It's become the leading factor that influences people when they're voting as of 2024, which before it was economy or something more vague.
Yeah, economy generally. Climate change at some points, I think.
Yeah, now it's become kind of all about immigration. It's the most talked about thing politically. And Reform are very much using this. They're using immigration and they're sort of labelling as a populist party to attract all these people that feel like the establishment, the current governments are just not doing enough, which does help in some way. It's helped by the fact that our parties are generally quite towards the centre. You know, Conservative and Labour are, other than 2010, haven't not won an election in a very, very long time. So therefore, it's quite easy to take this stance of, a more radical, more arguably revolutionary in some ways approach to politics, of making big moves for this supposed crisis of immigration, which, some people believe it's much more severe than others, but that is, I guess, a matter of opinion. It really isn't, because, it's factual, but it's become a matter of opinion. So I suppose if we're going to talk about the Conservative Party, do we think that they should kind of take this similar direction and focus more on immigration? Or is this going to become a problem?
In terms of the politics of it, I think we've seen what happens in the last 2 years when, Labour specifically tried to sort of shift to the right on immigration. I mean, their Home Secretary, who's still in her job, to be fair to her, it was very strict on immigration, lowering it, and trying to sort of counter-reform with their own politics.
Hmm.
And that hasn't really worked among the voter base. Because, well, why do you think that is? I'll give you
Because
a question.
it just kind of, it's a difficult position when you have like, you have a growing, I don't really know what the word, but we're moving away from two-party system, as we talked about plenty of times before. So therefore, you can't, kind of like a right-wing party can't go too far right, because then they infringe upon the further right party, and you go too far left, and you kind of lose your way, and you infringe upon the more central parties. Whereas before, this wasn't really an issue. The Conservatives dominated the right side of politics, and therefore could expand kind of whichever way they wanted to. So it's quite a different political scene than it was for most of British history.
Yeah, and I think there is just a sort of resentment towards the two main parties, both Labour and Conservative. You've got to look at the economic conditions. A lot of Reform's appeal is to do with working class voters who are in sort of deprived areas, who haven't got many job opportunities, and who used to be Labour voters but have shifted away because their lives just measurably have not improved over the last 20 years. And obviously it's, immigration's a visible topic. People see it in their daily lives, and therefore Reform is able to sort of use that.
Yeah, and it's a unifying cause, which I think is, again, one of those things that the more extreme... I need to be careful with my words. I'm not saying extremist party, I'm not saying a radical party, but I mean sort of further along either side of the spectrum. I think those parties are able to unify much better. Because if you think historically, right, there's no leader that all members of a party can agree that we're a good leader, because it's such a spread cause. Like, I don't think I'm getting my words out very well. But
Yeah,
it's
so you
it's such a wide range of people, whereas when you then bring out more types of parties and more parties, then you can kind of focus more on a specific issue, and if that leader therefore follows, is focused on that issue, like immigration, all Reform voters arguably have their main focus on immigration as a fairly accurate stereotype, therefore they're quite unified.
Yeah, and there's a lack of sort of typical party politics. Like with the Conservatives, you've obviously got the sort of Thatcherites, the One Nation divide. Labour's even worse. There's about 4 main factions. And so it's very hard for their leader to come out and explicitly say, oh, we're going to be tough on immigration because he's at risk. Well, Starmer was at risk of...
It's much harder to actually capture your...
not the right word.
It's much harder to capture your full voter base, whereas I think Reform and parties like Green, they can cater to people that are very much more loyal to that specific party because of a fixation on a certain issue. Like they used to be, well, technically they still are very fixated on the environment and climate change. Reform are very fixated on immigration. It's a system that works to get loyal followers, which you could argue it's a bit cultish, but it works.
Yeah, I mean, there's also the sort of silent Reform voters, a lot of people who are moderate, who aren't racist. I mean, the stereotype will always be that Reform voters are racist, but the majority aren't, because else they wouldn't be leading the polls. So there are voters who are moderate, who have seen their taxes go up, who have seen their living conditions decreasing. It's very easy for them, not as racist people, not as evil people, to be drawn into a party which has a very clear message. Because modern politics is ultimately very confusing. The two main parties really haven't solved the issues of the day, and so there are more moderate voters who go to Reform.
So I suppose the question is why they're not going to the Conservatives. Is that just due to history?
Well, I'm going to make the assumption that a lot of these moderate voters would have voted Conservative, and so feel they need to change their vote, because there's always the idea of the 14 years of failure, and we can analyse that in another episode. But yeah, I think they would have lost faith in the Conservative Party and don't see another choice.
Okay, I'm now going to introduce our first ever guest to the show. He is a young Conservative member who's very, very active for his party. I'm sure he can tell you more about that if he wants to talk about himself a little bit. It's Will Saddington. Will, feel free to introduce yourself.
Hello, thank you, Ben. Yes, as Ben and Max mentioned, I'm a young Conservative member, have been for the last 5 or 6 years. And yes, I mean, I frequently enjoy discussing with other members, going out campaigning, and stuff like that. So yeah, it's very interesting, and I think this will be enjoyable.
Good, I'm glad to hear it. Okay, I think let's just get straight to the questions because we all know you've got a lot of things to give us. So we'll start with the first one. What do you think it is about reform that is luring in the right-wing voters?
I think people are sort of disenfranchised with our party as a whole. I think people look back and are upset with sort of our perceived failings on immigration. We haven't, quote unquote, stopped the boats. We haven't done stuff like that. And all the fiasco around Liz Truss, which was a massive mistake, which thankfully as a party we've now recognised. And under Camille we've got brilliant new leadership and brilliant stuff like that. I noticed only this morning that thanks to her new vetting of candidates for MPs, past MPs, like an ex-Transport and Home Secretary, are rumoured to have been declined from standing as an MP. So we've got the new vetting, we've got stuff like that to take the voters back who are disenfranchised with us. And yeah, I think we're in a good position going forward, as seen through our growth in the polls and reforms downfall in the polls as well.
Okay, thank you. So why aren't, sort of statistically, younger voters aren't connecting with the Conservative Party or the right wing generally? So do you want to kind of comment about that?
Well, I think we as a party have a sort of image that we're, for the more older people, the upper classes, the wealthy. And I don't agree whatsoever. I think we had an image and we need to reinvigorate the image that we're for hard-working, aspirational young people of all backgrounds. People who want to own a property, start a family, be able to keep money they earn, be able to start a business if they want to without being taxed to death. So I think it's really about that sort of thing and about showing young people the possibilities that we have for them as a party, that the Labour Party, who failed young people, is in the 1970s, in the late noughties with the Great Depression, not the Great Depression, the Winter of Discontent and the financial downfall of the 2008. I think it's about showing people that sort of side to the party and reinvigorating them in that perspective.
Right, can I ask Will a question?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, so currently in the UK, it's much harder to own a property. It's much harder to run a business. How would you fix stuff like the housing market? If you're going to rely on votes from young people from them being aspirational, how are you going to bring about said economic change?
Yeah, I think a lot of it, as a lot of people are disenfranchised with us as a party, is around immigration. I think a lot of that, if we can manage to cut that back and cut that down, you look at Margaret Thatcher's record in the 80s and how she reinvigorated the housing markets and got people to owning properties and got aspirational young people into that sort of circumstances and stuff like that. I think it's about showing people that we're not going to tax them whenever they start to earn money and sort of show them the promises of being aspirational and how that can be rewarding for people in that regard. I hope that answers your question.
So what do you think about things like council housing?
What do you mean?
Do you think we need to build more homes? What is the attitude of the Conservative?
I certainly think so. I know Andy Burnham said that he's going to have the biggest council housing building of the since the post-war period. I think was his quote. I think Andy Burnham's certainly an interesting character. I don't think he's going to bring in the change that he's promised. In the noughties he was a Blairite and then suddenly he was a Corbynite. Now he's somewhere in between. So I don't think we know about him from that regard, but yeah.
Okay. The biggest council house building programme was under a Conservative Prime Minister, so, it's interesting to see about their attitudes to it now. Right, okay. Moving
on. So why should a young voter choose the Conservatives over the further right parties like Restore and Reform?
Well, I think people are going to recognise what is, to be quite honest, an absolute clown show that is going on over at Reform UK. I mean, there's a question over if they're even a right-wing party. One minute they for the trade unions, another minute they want to keep the two-child benefit cap that they've been doing, and then they wanted to get rid of it, and now they want to have it again. So nobody really knows where they stand. Talk about their competency at local government. I mean, look at Nottinghamshire County Council. We've got flags all over the place, potholes everywhere, and the council tax is going up, even though they said they wouldn't raise council tax and they'd fix the potholes. So you look at it at that regard, and you look at it that actually a lot of the Conservative failings, perceived failings, that we saw over the last 14 years, the likes of immigration under Suella Braverman as Home Secretary, who's now gone to Reform, I think a lot of the problems with the party have gone over to there. The sorts of issues with financial issues and financial honesty seen through Farage's kerfuffle with George Cottrell and the £5 million crypto billionaire donation. So I think people will recognise that, recognising their incompetencies, and see that the Conservative Party is the sensible party for right-wing, young, aspirational people, and see them as the way that they can sort of build a living, build a family, and build a property-owning democracy, not Reform, where nobody knows what they're going to do, nobody knows what they truly believe in, and nobody knows how honest Mr Farage truly is.
Good answer.
Right, can I have another question, please? Just
Yeah, of course, Max.
right. So, obviously, John Major said in an interview like a week or two ago that Reform had a limit to their voter base because of the sort of immigration focus.
Yeah.
Because you could call it a cult, probably a bit harsh, but you could say Farage has a cult of personality around him. So, do you think the Conservatives have any limits to their voter base? And if so...
Not at all.
Yeah.
I mean, we demonstrated under Boris how flexible as a party we are. As you mentioned, going up and taking red wall seats. The Bolsover seat, which was Dennis Skinner's for 49 years, give or take, we took in 2019. So we do have that flexibility. I think Reform certainly have reached their peak, and they did so a few months ago. I think they peaked at about 30%, and since then it's been a steady downfall as people realise what truly is going on. I mean, Nigel Farage, I said that it's a clown show. He's facing a bin in a couple of weeks' time for a by-election. So I don't think they're a serious party. I don't think they're a competent party, and I don't think they're a coherent right-wing party that actually has a plan for the future other than immigration, 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 and then all the problems will be solved. I think people will recognise that the Conservatives are the party with a plan who will limit immigration sensibly and rebuild an economy under Mel Stride.
Oh. Shout out to him. Well, John, do the next question.
No, I just want to drop in a fact check to support what we were saying, just for anyone who's interested. Reform peaked at 29% in May 2025, and they now sit at 25%. So with
which
with a
polling?
decrease looking.
Is that YouGov?
polls. Sorry, yeah, according to YouGov polls, yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, I'll go to the next question. Our fourth penultimate question. Do you think that you and the other young Conservatives are sufficiently represented within your party?
Certainly. I mean, when I go out and we go campaigning, there are a massive amount of people my age, university age, some slightly older into their mid-late 20s, that go out and campaign because they recognise that they don't want the high tax burden that Labour inevitably bring, and they don't want the perceived ideological sort of shift that Reform are promising. We'll see if that pays out if they get into any power. I think this people are recognising that, and recognising that they want to build a society in which hard work pays off, in which you aren't going to be taxed. The middle classes aren't going to be taxed. If you earn a bit of money, you're not going to have to tax that away and spend it recklessly. I think people are recognising that. I certainly recognise that, and I think a lot of people that come out and campaign with me, knocking on the doors and talking to people on the doorstep, recognise that as well.
Okay.
Am I allowed to slot in another question?
Of course, you don't have to ask permission, that's okay.
Yeah, no, I know. I just want to keep it polite. So Will, do you think that younger people, I mean, it's obviously shown that young people are more left-wing. Do you think the reason young people would be attracted to the Conservatives is reactionary against the fact that the majority of people they see around them are left-wing? Do you think there's any influence there? Or the fact they're sort of disenfranchised with the left of, well,
I think
the majority
people
of
will
their
be.
generation.
I think ideologically, a lot of people support the left wing. You know, they support, you know, giving a lot of money out to people. But I think people will recognise that that's a very sort of dogmatic outlook on it. I think that sort of giving people money as a handout isn't the answer to it.
Again, I just want to
Yeah.
do a quick fact check, again, because I know people are interested in the statistics of things. For the 18 to 24 age category, again, according to YouGov, as of the 20th of July, which was only 3 days ago as of recording, the most popular party with this age range is the Green Party at 41%, followed by Labour at 17%, Conservative at 12%, and Reform at 8%. So again, these, the younger people are very left-leaning, is very much supported. Right.
So to answer your question, Max, I think ideologically a lot of people look to the left because they think it's a sort of you know, a more moral answer.
Yeah,
I think it's a bit
egalitarian,
dogmatic. Yeah, I think it's a bit dogmatic. I think people do and will recognise once they start to earn money that the value of having that and the value and the incentive that brings to go out and contribute more to society. I don't think, you know, when working and middle classes are being taxed so heavily and small business owners are being taxed and regulated so heavily, I don't think it provides the incentive that people need to sort of grow the economy. And I think people will recognise that. Add into that, once we get these sort of widely left-wing governments in, as seen in 2008 and in the late 70s, I think people then recognise the sort of downfall and the sort of negative aspects of those in reality as well. So I think it's just a sort of question of, you know, when will people sort of notice that? People will probably notice that. The statistics, as Ben sort of pointed out, they do. So I think it sort of will shift in that sort of way.
But there's a defined difference between the sort of woke social justice aspects of the left and the more sort of traditional people who aren't like anti-capitalist, who are more moderate. And so do you think that has an influence? Or do you think the majority of young people are more sort of woke, if we call it progressive kind of thing?
I mean, I think it's a really wide spectrum. I mean, I know people, you know, completely across the spectrum. If I were to make an estimate, I'd say they're probably slightly more gaggled around the left and the left of centre. But that's not to discredit the right at all, and it's not to discredit the really, as you said, the woke left or the centre, the sort of Blairites. I think there's a mix of them. And as I say, really, I think as people start to contribute and involve themselves more in the economy and in society, when they get their jobs, when they contribute properly, I think that will then have an impact, and they'll sort of recognise, and as they do further research and reading, recognise the sort of dogmatism around the sort of handing out of tax money that we currently have under this Labour government.
Okay, we ready for the last question?
Yeah.
Okay, our final question for you, Will, is what changes need to be made for the future of the Conservative Party in order to win over Reform?
Yeah, I mean, as I say, really, I think we're on the right track. The polls certainly suggest that we've been going up in the polls, and Reform have been absolutely catastrophically shooting down. So I think we're on the right track. I think Kemi's certainly growing and has grown as a leader, and we're sort of making the sort of sensible, pragmatic decisions. We've decided that leaving the ECHR was the right move forward. We didn't sort of rush into it without any second thought, like Reform have done, and the Treasury spokesperson, or whatever his name is now that he's was sacked from the party and he moved over to Reform. Mr. Jenrick.
Yes.
What was that, sorry?
Oh, nothing, it's fine. Just thinking who it was.
Yeah. So I think Kemi's proving to be a competent leader, a leader that looks pragmatically and sort of builds upon a more evidence-based approach, rather than shooting to whatever she thinks will be popular, as Reform have done. And as Reform, you can see from Reform, and having to backtrack and go backwards and forwards, as seen with the two-child benefit cap, which they're completely flip-flopping on, and their association with unions as well.
Do you see a lot of, well, from our perspective, there's a lot of similarity in Conservative people's minds between Kemi Badenoch and Margaret Thatcher in a way. There seems to be this kind of comparison between the two. Do you think they have notable similarities in beliefs and how they act as a leader?
I mean, the growth of reform, I think, is due to people wanting the party to shift more to the right. We certainly, sort of grew the benefit bill, the welfare bill, sort of increased taxes under Johnson and under that era. And I think people are moving to reform now because they want a more right-wing outlook. And I think Kemi's providing that sensible, if you want to use the word Thatcherite, then go for it, that sensible outlook that reform aren't bringing. And rushing into it is what reform are doing. We're taking it much more slowly and steadily and bringing a much more pragmatic approach to Thatcherism.
Okay, cool.
Thank you very much, Will. We appreciate you coming on. I'm sure we'll be asking for you to come back on again in the future. I've got things in mind that I would love for you to come back for. So we do appreciate that. Thank you very much. Thank you for watching.
Thank you.
That is the end.